Hail and conquer, good sir.
Broken Trinity, what the fuck is going on, goddammit?
Hey, how you doing, brother?
Man, we're doing great, dude. We just got done blasting Replicating Rebellion Satanic Propaganda.
Yeah, I saw that, man.
Badass fucking track, dude.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Are we doing the interview now, or are you waiting until the song's over?
No, man, we're live right now on the fucking radio, dude.
Okay, I guess we're a little behind here. Hey, man, I just wanted to say right off the bat, man, we cannot praise you guys enough for what you've been doing for us, man. I mean, we're like over the moon. I got my 6-string slinger, 7-string, my bad, Sean Morrissey here with me. And like I said, man, we're just so grateful for everything that you guys have done for us, man. I needed to say that right off the bat before anything else gets said.
Man, thank you, dude. Thank you. I really appreciate that, man. You know, we fucking try, dude. We work hard, man. We try, you know. Yeah. You know, but the truth is, man, it all comes down to the fucking music, man. How strong the fucking tunes are, you know. Like, you guys are the ones making the music, man. All we're doing is cheerleading it and putting it out there, you know. But you guys are the ones making the tunes, man. And it's a killer record, man. Oh, I appreciate that, man, so much. I mean, it's kind of funny because I've been on the other side of the table for 32 years, you know, interviewing and reviewing bands. And, you know, it's kind of funny because I remember going to shows when I was in the music, and, you know, you staring up at the band and you kind of feel small, you know, you watch them perform and you're like, God, you know, I wish I could do that. And now that I'm on that side of the fence, you know, I feel like my knowledge and learning of the metal scene is nearing completion, you know, because I got to experience being a metal journalist and a radio host for 19 years. And, you know, of course, my compatriot Sean here has done his radio excursions as well. So
yeah, I did college radio back in the day and did a metal radio show myself. So I definitely mad respect to you for what you're doing, keeping this going and getting the music out there to the masses.
Hell yeah, man. Well,
hell yeah.
It's full fucking circle, man. You know, and it's funny that you mentioned that because for me, it was sort of like the other way around. Like, I got started in all this from putting out my music and then getting sort of pulled into the radio world through that, you know, and then here I am doing this now. So exactly. Well, you know, there's a 91.1 FM in Atlanta, WREK. Yeah. And they do a metal show every Friday night, and they've been doing it, what, 30 or 40 years. Yeah, 30 or 40 years. And Sean and I have actually guest hosted on there. It's kind of funny to think about Georgia because there's a little bit of history there. So, you know, I sang for Hallows Eve back in the early 2000s. That was like the first metal band in Georgia that got signed to a recording contract.
With Tommy.
Yeah, with Tommy and Scully and who else was in that band at the time? Well, I mean, it was a different lineup when I joined, and of course, you know, WREK is probably like the longest running FM metal radio show. And of course, I had the world's oldest and longest running internet-based music publication, Vibrations of Doom. So all that history just kind of, you know, it just kind of came together, man. And that's where it all started, you know, man. Up here anyway. That's cool as fuck too that you mentioned that, because I mean, like, Tommy, you know, we go fucking way back, man. He's a good friend, dude. He's been a huge supporter of Metal Devastation. He's always at the festival, man. He's always coming up and hanging out. He's always got a booth set up and everything. And that guy, man, he loves to talk, dude. He will. You can talk to him about. He'll talk your ear off, man. But he's fucking awesome. I love him.
He's a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I remember the first. You know, the funny thing is, me joining Hallows Eve actually started out with me wanting to do a Hallows Eve because, you know, I grew up on the '80s metal stuff. You know, the Hyrax and the, you know, the Sabotage and the Celtic Frost and, you know, the Man of War and, you know, Onslaught and Warlord, you know, Omen and stuff like that. And I was like, man, I got to get a Hallows Eve interview. And I started talking to Tommy. Man, Tommy was telling us stories about, you know. People don't know this about Tommy, but Tommy was almost the bass player for the Ramones.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people know that story, man. It was amazing, you know, and the stuff he told me about, you know, playing some karate dojo and getting paid, you know, not to play and stuff like that. I mean, the man's got the most amazing stories, but I remember a moment when I was in Hallows Eve and we would rehearse, and they told me I kind of sounded like Stacy, but man, dude, I'll be honest with you, bro, I could not even stand to hear my own voice. Like when he'd play, because he'd record everything, and I'd literally have to walk out the room, and he goes, all right, I know what's going on, come on back in here. So he gave me a tape. I think we had done Metal Merchants, I think it was, off the Tales of Terror. He said, here, put on a set of headphones, take the tape, and sing over the top of what he said, don't try to do anything different, just sing over the top. And I said, I'll see what the hell that's going to do. And then when I heard it, that was the first time in my life I really heard how I sounded.
Hell yeah.
You know, it's interesting too what Steve, to add to what Steve is saying, like, as somebody who, I'm not a professional studio engineer by any means, but I do record I record most of our stuff, and I record, you know, the stuff from my other band. And one thing I learned very early on when recording music was you always have to like double your vocals, because one single vocal track is always going to kind of sound a little shitty at first, but when you layer it, and it's the same with any instrument. Well, more like with guitars, you don't necessarily layer drums, but like guitars and such and vocals, you always layer, because that one single like take is just it's thin sounding. I'm with Steve on that. Like I hate hearing just my voice by itself, one single track. So I just finished recording some new stuff, and like I've even learned a few new tricks along the way when it comes to like recording and mixing. And mixing in and of itself is an art form, but like you always have to like layer your vocals. Same even with extreme vocals, screams and growls and stuff. Yeah, you got to layer that stuff, because without it being layered, it's going to sound a little ridiculous and thin. And you hear those tracks by themselves, and you're like, "Oh my god, that's awful." But then when you put it over the music, especially, you know, the extreme vocals, the gutturals and the fry screams or whatever,
Blackened screams.
the black metal style vocals. When you put it over the appropriate music, it comes out sounding like, oh yeah, that's what that's supposed to sound like, you know. I was the same way when I first started recording myself, and back in the day, because I my first metal band was a band called Ground Zero, and I definitely did not. Oh God, I like shudder to even like go back and listen to some of those early recordings, because I'm like, I mean, back then we were recording on either like a 4-track, you know, tape machine, or even I had an old reel-to-reel that you had to bounce from left and right. It wasn't a multi-track machine, but this was back when, you know, you couldn't go into a computer and just drag and drop and copy and paste riffs. You literally had to give your best performance all the way through the recording to get it right. Yeah. So I'm with Steve on that. Vocals are a bitch to record sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
And I tend to sing loud too, so it's hard to get that balance. I sometimes wonder if I could learn to sing quieter, but I mean, you've seen some of our live stuff. I get into it, and it's like something takes over, and I feel like I'm sometimes not even in control. But that's the way a fucking metal show should be, man. You know.
Hell yeah, dude. You mentioned that song "Metal Merchants," and actually at the first year that we did the festival, Tommy's band played. And they did a cover of that. They did a version of that song, and Richie from Gravehuffer got up on stage with them and did it, man. It was bad fucking ass, dude.
Yeah, that's a good song. You know, when I was listening to 80s metal back in the day, I sound like an old fuck now, but no, I used to, I mean,
we all are, man.
Yeah, well, I used to live in Savannah, Georgia. That was where Vibrations of Doom started back in 1992, and I would literally, like, you know, Savannah's considered one of the most haunted cities in the United States, so of course that's where I'd be born, but, you know, I used to ride through the Bonaventure Cemetery at night with, like, either Hallows Eve's Death and Insanity or Slayer's Rain and Blood on the headphones. It's like I was looking for the damn ghosts and the spirits, man, but I never saw any, dude. But that was where it all started. Vocally, what I'm really influenced by is singers like Stacey Anderson from Hallows Eve, because Cy Keeler from Onslaught, and of course that ungodly dude John Cyrus from Agent Steel. I mean, these guys could like belt high. Like Stacey Anderson, man, criminally underrated as a vocalist. I mean, he could hit high notes and still do that almost death metal growling stuff. And vocally, I take cues from that. Also, who influenced me, the mighty Messiah Mark Holen from Candlemass. I mean, here's the first time you heard a damn opera singer singing for a metal band, and it was doom. I mean, I still try to do that vibrato and the sung vocals. It's not easy, but I learned some techniques from him, and that's kind of how I shape the cleans as well as the blackened. The blackened stuff, I just pull from the gut and just gut rip it, man. Because that's how you do it, and breath control and all that. I've probably it's pretty crazy, man.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, not to keep on talking about Tommy, but because it's fresh on my mind, I was just talking to him earlier today, and we're actually promoting a new song that they're going to be releasing later this month, and it's very much something that Hallows Eve fans are gonna fucking like. I mean, that's all I can say, but I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, definitely stay tuned for that. It'll be all over the place, man. Yeah,
I believe it or not, even though I haven't done an issue of the magazine in about 3 or 4 years, I still get promos all the time. I'm actually thinking about resurrecting Doom Radio. I think you and I talked about that.
You should, man. You should.
Yeah, I mean, I've got so much 80s metal stuff. Private collectors from Europe during like the mid 90s would send me like just ungodly stuff from Europe I'd never heard of, like Steel Angel, and the Sweden had an amazing 80s metal scene that rivaled that of the new wave of British heavy metal movement from 79 to 84. I mean, you had amazing bands like Gotham City, Universe, Silver Mountain, Axe Witch, and the thing that always struck me about them was they had these incredible vocal melodies. They weren't trying to be like really heavy or anything. They just kind of took the template for the new wave of British heavy metal movement and they just ran with it. And that just such masterful stuff. And I want to make sure that people hear about this.
Yeah, dude. Dude, there's so much good stuff out there, man. That's one of the things that I love so much about the radio thing. Like, when I first got into it and started doing interviews and shit, got on those mailing lists, and all of a sudden they just all started fucking flooding into my fucking inbox, and like every day, man, it's like Christmas, dude. But like,
exactly, it's like a kid in a candy store.
But it's funny, like there's so much fucking shit. Like a lot of it's really underground, really obscure and stuff, and so much of it gets kind of brushed over by the mainstream media. Like, because I mean, not to talk shit about them or anything. Like, they're doing what they do, but like they can't possibly cover all of it. It's just impossible. But like, that's always been a passion of mine, to try to focus on those underdogs, man, the ones that just sort of seem to get brushed over, man, because when you dig in deep and you actually fucking just open that shit up and listen to it, man, you find there's some shit in there, of course, but there's a lot of really good stuff, man.
Well, the other thing too, and I mean, about those underground bands, the more obscure stuff, it's more grassroots, it's more DIY, and a lot of that stuff, it's raw, it's real emotional. There's real emotion there, there's real feeling there.
Fire.
There's real fire, there's real passion. And don't get me wrong, there is stuff that comes out in the mainstream that is good. There is talent in the mainstream, but this is something that applies also to our genre. There is a lot of commercialized metal bands out there that sound very overproduced and very overprocessed. And it kind of takes away, like if I go back, say, and listen to like a Morbid Angel album from the 90s, or a Death album, or like early Emperor or something like that. Carcass, right. You go back, you listen to some of that early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, any of the death and thrash metal and such back then, whereas some of the stuff sounds really good. I mean, like some of those engineers, because you got to keep in mind, those sound engineers, those studio engineers back then, this was a new thing to them. They're like, how do you
Scott Burns.
Right. Sound Studios.
Yeah. Morris Sound Studio, great example.
John Morris Sound Studios.
Right. No, but these it was very new to those guys, but they figured out, they adapted, the whole adapt and overcome. It's like, all right, well, how do we record this drummer with two kick pedals or two bass drums? How do we record that, going so fast? They had to figure this stuff out, because this was kind of a new thing to them. It was sort of like they were really exploring new frontiers with music, and also a lot of guitar players were turning the gain further up and getting the good guitars to have a much more like sizzle. sizzle to their sound and whatnot.
Yeah. Like those,
you know what I mean?
Those old Cannibal Corpse albums and Deicide and fucking Obituary, all that shit, man.
My God, Obituary, yeah. That's high school days for me.
So fucking heavy, dude.
You know what I mean? But no, nowadays I feel like some of the stuff that's coming out there, a lot of these bigger metal acts that you have, and again, nothing against them. I've mad respect for them achieving the success they have, but a lot of the stuff that's coming out that's a little more commercialized, and I hate to say cookie cutter, has a very processed sound. And sometimes, it's okay, that's really good, but at the same time, it kind of takes away from some of that rawness that the three of us, and probably a lot of the listening audience out there, has come to appreciate in the metal genre, the underground music genres, is that there's this rawness that kind of gets lost when you start over processing music. Because I like, you listen to old black metal, and that stuff is lo-fi as shit. I mean, this is stuff that literally, you hear about even somebody like, the Bertham guy recording with a set of headphones in the middle of the studio room.
Yeah, he's using a Fisher-Price tape recorder.
Right, exactly. But at the same time, there was something about that, and what I like about especially some of the old, the really underground black metal and whatnot, is that it's a challenging art form. But I have mad respect, and we have a good friend of ours that we do a lot of gigs with, who's a solo black metal artist.
Oh yeah,
Abaddon Killmister, and he plays a distorted bass, and he plays to drum tracks live. It's just him, and he puts on like stage makeup and all that. But I have great respect for that because it's true to the art form, and it's what I like to call it's art that's challenging. It's not for everybody, but it's for those who get it. And I think people like us, who are like, dyed in the wool metalheads, actually get that. We get that. Yeah, this guy is true to his art form, and I have great respect for these bands that just said, you know what, I'm just gonna record this shit with whatever medium I have to record it on. I'm going to put it out there. I don't give a shit if it's polished and refined. Sometimes the only way to do something is to just do it. And if all you have at your disposal is a shitty little guitar amp and an old, beat up PV guitar and a drum machine and a boom box, hey, record your music and put it out there, because you never know who's going to like it. Sometimes you just got to throw ideas at the wall and see what sticks. Take off even if you crash. You're never going to know unless you try.
Yeah, man. That reminds me. There was a show that I went to a couple years ago in Memphis, and it was just a bunch of underground fucking extreme metal bands. But there was one band on there that it was literally just one dude. He got up there with his guitar, and he had a fucking like a podium thing set up for his microphone. He had a bunch of pedals hidden behind it, and he had drum machine going and everything. And he just fucking like it sound, but like he had like everything, it sounded massive. But he was just literally just standing there with his guitar, fucking screaming his ass off. Fuck, I can't remember the name of the fucking shit.
It wouldn't have to be Putrid Pile, would it?
No, it was Lucifer something, Luciferian.
Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about, actually.
Fuck, it was badass though, man.
Well, there is a guy that tours the world that plays death metal that does that, Putrid Pile, like Steve just mentioned, and he's just one guy. But if you listen to his albums, like his recordings, they sound massive. They sound like it could be a full band. And then he tours the world playing just his guitar, and he's got drum tracks on stage. But I've seen video footage of this guy performing, and he's playing to like giant festival crowds. I respect that.
That's hard to do, man. It really is. So many people have preconceived notions about what metal is. The one thing that really pisses me the fuck off is the gatekeepers. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, I grew up in an era, like, I'll give you an example. I hated hair metal because when I first really got into metal, I was into like, Celtic Frost and Anvil and all that stuff. And like, man, who are these poser motherfuckers, man? But when you get right down to it, well, people don't realize glam metal came about because it was a reaction to the thrash metal, tough guy kind of street look, the guys from Exodus and Forbidden and Faith or Fear, they're wearing fucking Reebok high tops and they got the ripped jeans and, all that shit. And they're just like, you know what, we're just going to rebel against that. Metal's always been about rebellion. Like these gatekeepers like, oh, if you're a black metal band, you have to sing about Satan. No, the fuck you don't. If you're a black metal band, Look, I was a journalist, and people don't know this. Growing up through the 80s, when people talked about black metal, the journalists were the ones that tagged things, you and I. And black metal was Running Wild and Hellhammer and King Diamond, because they all sang about Satanism. Now, a journalism's job, just bear with me on this one, man, but a journalism's job is to describe what the music sounds like. When you've got a power metal band like Running Wild and, a kind of a speedy power metal band and what King Diamond and Merciful Fate did, and you got the brutal, like, caveman crunch of Hellhammer, that's not black metal is not a proper musical description for these three bands. So that's why Norway redefined it in the 90s. It's starting off with Bathory and Quorthon. That particular vocal style, that, this is what black metal is, because you can't, you have to be able to tell somebody what something sounds like. I mean, when I describe black metal, it's icy guitar work. And even Doom, I love Blackened Doom that has all the notes on the last three strings of the guitar. You can tell I ain't technical worth of shit, but but that's what it is. And that vocal style, like I kind of get upset when people call us a death metal band, even though now I'm doing more death metal vocals than I kind of wanted to. But some of the stuff that we've layered, like I do the death metal vocals on top of the black metal vocals, and man, it sounds vicious as fuck. I'm like, all right, you know what? Y'all have kind of dragged me around to y'all's way of thinking. We're going to do this.
I feel like it's sort of like Blackened Death. Like it reminds me of, take it with a grain of salt, but like, it's sort of in the same wheelhouse as like a Behemoth, Belphegor type thing.
I'm well, like I said, here's the history behind the album, a little brief.
Yeah, tell us about the record, tell us about the band, man. Tell us everything, dude.
All right, well, so first of all, when I left Hallows Eve, I did a little stint with Victim 9, which was the lead singer and guitarist from Atlanta Thrasher's Murder Van. All right, and of course, Ray Adriano had some ideas. He's an amazing guitar writer, but primarily he played bass in Murder Van. He had all these ideas, and Skrawl's the main writer. I mean, nothing against that guy. He can write some killer thrash. If y'all haven't listened to any Murder Van, y'all need to, seriously. But anyway, Ray came along, and I was looking to start. I had actually wanted Sean about 10 years prior, but, commitments got in the way. He moved to Cleveland, and that opened some doors for us. We actually played up there as Broken Trinity and Sonic Armada. And so we had all these ideas, and I said, Broken Trinity to me was primarily supposed to be heavily doom metal based, and that's what I wanted originally. I don't know if people know this. There's a Blackened doom band from Bulgaria called Dark Flight. And I have that guy Ivo. He's like, I consider him to be one of the top 5% of composers in the entire fucking world. I mean, he makes soul crushing, like this stuff grabs you by the heart and just whips on it. And he sent me some stuff. He said he was looking for a good, clean singer, and that year was a terrible year for me. My dad had died, my girlfriend of 5 years walked out, and I lost a job that I'd been with for almost 10 years. And then he comes in and says, all right, here's the first track. I'm gonna let you do some clean vocals. You can write your own lyrics. And wouldn't you know it, the title of the song was called Giving Up. And I sat down with that with tears in my eyes, and I wrote 3 pages of lyrics, and I swear to you, 90% of that shit I can't even remember writing after I wrote it. I looked at it, and I was like, whoa, where the fuck? I still have about 3 pages of lyrics I need to put somewhere. But that was my first recorded foray into metal. I literally did clean vocals, and after one song, it turned into 2. Sansa May was another track I really enjoyed. The last 3 minutes of that 13-minute epic are all me. And it changed the way I looked at lyric writing. I always sit down with a thesaurus and a dictionary when I write lyrics, because, I want to be. I mean, look, man, we've been bashed for decades. That roar, roar, roar. Everybody makes fun of the death metal vocals, but there's no reason that we can. Satanism and violence and overt gore, that's been done to death. There's a whole world full of history, intellectual knowledge, philosophical musings that. I mean, shit, man, these make great metal topics. I mean, look at Offspring Forged from Deathless Souls, for instance. That was a quote by one of my favorite spiritual authors, James Allen, and it was my way of saying it's kind of like a. Danzig had in his early days, like kind of the blues songs where they did the bragging thing, but I wanted to kind of like be the bragging mouthpiece for all of mankind. Because, we're all going to die someday, and I just hope there's a great place that we go to. But,
love Danzig too, man. Oh, my God.
Yeah, exactly. I take cues from everywhere. I mean, Satanic Propaganda, a lot of people think that's a song about Satanism. That song has almost nothing to do with Satanism. It's my rallying cry to all the left-handed path religions in this country. Because look, man, you see what's going on. I don't want to get into political or religious stuff here, but you see what's going on where, politically they're wanting to bring religion into the big arena. There's no separation of church and state anymore.
They already have.
Well, yeah, they have. But
it's
done.
My
thing is, look, what we're heading to right now is a return to the Dark Ages. I mean, why do you think our founding fathers ran like hell to get away from Europe, man? And then they come in here and they start doing the Salem witch trials and, persecuting people for blasphemy. It's like this cycle is doomed to repeat if the left-handed, and look, we're not here to take over. Like the song says, we don't come to wear the crown. We're not here to brandish the scepter. Pushing the pendulum back towards the center is what we're interested in. I mean, those are actual lyrics. We're just trying to make sure that Christians aren't murdering people that don't pray to the same God that they do. That's all.
Yeah, and it's still going on, man. I mean, that's one of the reasons why our festival got so fucking huge right off the bat, was because all the pushback here in this fucking area, man, the churches and everything, they just went crazy, dude. They tried to shut it down. I know. Right? It was insane, man. And like, all of a sudden,
in the Bible Belt,
it was everywhere, and I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Like, people are like freaking out. Why are they calling it devastation? I feel like something bad's gonna happen. They're gonna open a portal. I'm like, what the fuck? Y'all chill the fuck out, man.
Yeah, really.
But hey, man, publicity is publicity, so you gotta take it how you can get it.
Well, I'll tell you, I noticed a sort of a paradigm shift when I was living. See, I grew up. I was born here in Atlanta, and spent most of my life here. But having also lived up north for a little while, I noticed a dramatic difference in how just the general public sort of looks at extreme music. It was a complete paradigm shift when I was living in Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh yeah,
or playing around like New York. Yeah, well, I've never played in New York, although I may be in the near future. But my family's from New York, and I spent a lot of time in upstate New York, not too far outside of New York City as a kid. I spent Christmases and summers up there, and then I also lived in Cleveland, Ohio for almost 4 years. And the attitude towards extreme music in the Midwest, especially your cities like Cleveland, Chicago, just the Great Lakes areas of the country, is completely different than it is here in the South.
Oh, totally. Totally.
Not to say that you don't have, more sort of insular, rural type people that might have some strongly held religious convictions or whatever. You do. I actually worked because I work in the EMS business. I'm an EMT, and I actually worked rural EMS in rural Ohio. And yeah, you run into the same sorts of insular, small town people in rural Ohio. Hell, you see Amish people up there. And if you want to talk about a very, very dedicated religious movement, I mean, these guys are like the pinnacle of that. But but I mean, at the same time, the attitude towards extreme music, and this is even coming from people who are vehemently religious. I had coworkers who were devout Catholics, but they didn't judge. They knew I was a metal musician, and they didn't judge me for it. They thought it was cool. They were like, "Oh, that's really awesome, man! You play guitar, you play heavy music. That's really cool." They were open-minded to it. So, and I felt it's funny too, because my grandfather in New York was a Presbyterian minister. He was even open-minded to it. He didn't look down upon it. Him and my grandmother, they were very supportive of me being a musician. They sort of kept the God stuff in church. That's sure, that's the appropriate place for it. But when it came to the secular world, they weren't. I mean, yeah, sure, my grandmother had her reservations about it, but they weren't that judgmental about it. They were kind of like, "Oh, you're playing music? That's really cool." And the reason I think my grandmother was so supportive of it, albeit again she was a devout Christian, was because she was very into classical and opera music. So I think she had an appreciation for virtuosic music and the fact that I took up playing guitar and stuff.
Yeah. Let me just say too, man, as you're in the Bible Belt, I know you are. You can't hide it, man. But religion is a very, very personal choice. Like, I don't go out there and preach to people. I mean, you know, the particular brand of Odinism that I follow, I mean, I'm even getting hate from some of the pagan community because they're like, well, you're not supposed to just worship one God. That's borrowed from Abraham. I'm like, my path is similar to the path that Odin walked. I mean, he was a seeker of knowledge. He was a writer of poetry. He traveled the worlds. I mean, a lot of people don't understand that he traveled between realms. Like, he was searching for endless knowledge. I mean, and his quest was noble. He was trying to prevent the death of the gods at Ragnarok. And people don't understand that. It's like, you know, I hear a lot of crap about, oh, he practiced feminine magic. I'm like, if you're trying to save the world, you're going to do whatever the hell you have to do, even if it crosses boundaries. And I've always been a boundary crosser, you know. I mean, that's why I play the kind of music that I do. We're trying to create something different, something new, something exciting, because for 32 years I reviewed all these different types of metal, and I went, there's not a lot of doom, and, you know, there are Blackened doom bands, but very, very few of them, you know, save for Dark Flight, incorporate the clean vocals. I mean, my biggest inspiration was Forest Stream, and when My Dying Bride came out with the Songs of Darkness, Words of Light album, those black metal vocals he did, I mean, his music is just very, very intense, very moving, and that's what we want. I want more emotionally charged content, you know. We've got the brutality in spades, but, you know, we're all Typo Negative fans, believe it or not.
Hell yeah.
I don't know if that comes across, but it kind of shapes some of the orchestral stuff that Ray was writing. I mean, we weren't meant to be a synth band, but when you hear, like, Satanic Propaganda, the doom metal part, here's what's funny about Ray. Ray wasn't really much into doom metal when he joined the band, but he wrote the doom parts in a lot of our songs, and I just look at it and go, how the fuck are you creating this amazing masterpiece of soul-crushing doom, and you don't know hardly anything about it, man? But, you know, we got him. We put the chains around him. You know, he likes Officium Triste and Shape of Despair, and you know, we got him into Pentagram too, because Pentagram, man, they're about as long-running as Black Sabbath.
Hell yeah, man. You know. It's funny you were talking about like different places and how things are different in different areas of the country and whatnot. Like, I was born in California and I lived for a long time in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh wow!
Before I came down here, so like you know, I went to high school out there wearing Deicide shirts and stuff like that. Nobody nobody looked at me like I was anything weird. Like, it was normal. Like, you know, we used to go to metal shows all the time out there, and I remember even a friend of mine one time invited me to some fucking punk rock church, and like, I'm not religious at all, but like I was curious, so I was like, fuck it, I'll go check it out. And we went in there, and there was like mosh pits, and they were blasting fucking music and jumping around, beating the shit out of each other and shit, and I'm like, what the fuck? This is crazy. But like, it was funny, you know, but like, I come down here and it's like so fucking serious, man. Like,
I know.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, it's a totally different culture, man. You know, it was very much a culture shock, man. When I came down here, I was 18 years old, and yeah, I was not pleased at all. Like, it was sort of like it was I came down here because of a family tragedy thing that happened, and so I was sort of forced to come down here and stay with my grandparents for a while. But like, when that happened, man, I immediately I was just like looking around, and I was like, what the fuck is this, man? Like, what's the matter with you guys? Like, why are you freaking out about this shit, man? Like, fucking
No, I get not. No, I'm gonna play interviewer here for a minute because I'm very curious about something. You said you lived in Arizona, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the earlier years of my publication, we did a lot of coverage of stoner rock, and I was wondering if you'd ever been, you know, I keep reading about like Caius and Queens of the Stone Age in their earliest days, and I'm wondering, did you ever go to any of those desert generator parties they had? Because, man, you go like 50 miles out in the desert in the middle of nowhere, and there's fucking bands playing, they bring generators.
Yes. We used to go to desert parties all the time. Like, I couldn't tell you like if it was like genre specific or anything like that. We didn't really think about it that in those ways.
Yeah, well, it wasn't really defined like that back then. You know, Caius and like I said, Dozer and Queens of the Stone Age and Fu Manchu. I tell you, Small Stone to me out of California, they kind of kickstarted the desert rock / stoner rock genre. I mean, they had amazing bands. Like I actually saw Sons of Otis from Canada.
Really?
And they're like angry stoner spacey doom. There's not a band on this planet that you could really totally compare Sons of Otis to. Man, they're from Canada. They're like, you know, if there was a metal band that played out in the vastness, dark, black evilness of space, it's Sons of Otis. They actually opened up for Electric Wizard.
Oh yeah, you know, really going back there to those fucking times and going out to those desert parties and stuff like that. All it really was about, like all week, those of us that were kids that were going out there to it, all we cared about was the fact that we're going to fucking trip on shrooms, and we're going to fucking smoke weed, we're going to drink, we're going to get fucked up, and we're just going to have and just fucking have a great time. Like that's all we cared about, you know. But looking back on it now, I see what you mean, you know, and it's like there's like a whole thing about it, you know, like there's documentaries and stuff about that shit, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Caius was fucking badass, dude. I remember when they I remember that fucking first time I seen them on Headbangers Ball, dude. Back in the 90s, man.
Green Machine.
Yes,
that was the video.
yes.
Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, who the fuck is this, man?
I know.
This is weird, this is different, but like it's badass. I like it, man. It's just stripped down, raw, and they're just out there jamming on some fucking highway with a bunch of amps, you know, like dude.
Well, you know who really embraced the stoner rock scene? I'm gonna throw some names out there for if there's anybody out there that wants to pick up on this. There's a band called Sasquatch that toured the U.S. about 4 years ago, and they are fucking heavy, man. But you know, Norway has believe it or not, in the middle of the Blackened forest, Norway has a killer stoner rock scene. They got bands like the Satellite Circle, Gate 9. And there's a couple of bands too that do the whole, like they've got like the CD. I'm trying to remember, fucking old as shit now, but I'm trying to remember the band. But man, they got the retro. You know, you remember the old Houston Astros jerseys, those loud ass big Atari 2600 graphics they wore across the front.
Yeah, man.
So they do that. They got the vintage muscle cars on there. They bring out, but man, Scandinavia, it doesn't matter if they're playing industrial, gothic, metal, stoner rock. I mean, they master just about every genre that they touch. It's incredible. And I think part of the reason, I'll tell you what the problem here in America is. If you live in Norway, a lot of people don't know this. The government of Scandinavia supports their bands because they realize that black metal is Norway's biggest export. I did an interview with Hammerfall, and they were talking about how, you know, the government will not only pay for your rehearsal space, but they'll also fund your recording equipment. You know, they'll pay for studio time. If we could get that going on here,
it's crazy. They're all about fucking like pushing for people to be creative and do art, you know, and whatnot. And that's so awesome. Like that's what life should be about, man. Like that's what people should be doing. Not this fucking rat race, fucking 9 to 5 every goddamn fucking day, trying to fucking, you know what I mean? Like, that's America, man. Like, it's a different fucking, it's a different thing, man. But
the thing about being metal musicians is that we create the soundtrack for the working. I think, you know, metal is very much
for the working class.
Exactly, it's a very much a working man's music, and we create the soundtrack, and you. I mean, metalheads are always going to be very salt of the earth, very grounded, you know, people. And we, of course, as you know, we're like the most dedicated fans when it comes to music, because metal's not just a thing you get into.
And then get out in high school.
Right. You don't just get into it like, you know, that one summer when I was 17 and I was a big Slayer fan, but not anymore. No, there's no such thing. Nope. In the metal community, that does not exist. If you liked a band when you were 17, 20, 30, 40 years later, you probably still love that band and can go back and listen to it, and it probably still brings those same feelings that you had when you first listened to them when you were 16, 17 years old. So this isn't like a phase. We don't just get into it and then get out of it. You stay in it. It's almost like being in the mob or something like that. You can't get out. So
and of course on my end, you know, Yeah, of course, it was funny because my parents were highly religious, which is what caused me to start looking into the history of mankind and how history correlates very perfectly with religion. And if you look at a lot of the religions, they do have similarities, like, you know, the cross with Christ, and in Norse mythology, of course, you had Odin who hung himself from the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights. There's similarities. You know, there's definitely similarities, but, you know, my mom was, you know, she threw out a lot of my music, which really pissed me off. But I remember probably 10 years ago, I was in Savannah visiting, and we went into a Walmart, and, you know, there was this cute girl behind the counter trying to sell us phone service. And my mom steps up and she just starts, yeah, you know, my son ran a music magazine for Tuesday. And afterwards, I was like, Mom, what the hell are you doing? She's like, well, you know, we thought you were just rebelling. But, you know, they actually respect me now because they realize I wasn't just trying to piss off my parents. This is the life, soul, and blood of the essence of who I am as a human. This is what I do. Granted, I listen to other types of music. Like, I love ambient and electronic. In fact, I even have an electronic music project that I do, which is kind of like, it's kind of a kid-friendly thing because, you know, we need some good stuff for kids too, man.
And yeah, definitely, man.
To Steve, and also to add to Steve's point about it's our kind of music. I remember my folks asking me one time, and this was in my early adult years. They're like, so, you know, they said, it's not that we don't, you know, respect that you are a musician, but we want to, you know, like, we don't understand the music you're doing. My response to that was, you're not meant to. I said, this is my generation's music. I said, and I told them, I said, just like when you guys were growing up listening to Elvis and the Beatles, Grandma and Grandpa, their parents, they didn't understand that. They thought that was, you know, that stuff was heresy and anathema, and people, there was like, what was it, like Billy Graham back in the, who was saying that who was actually, I think he was a cousin to Jerry Lee Lewis.
Oh, wow.
The big time musician in the 50s, and was calling it the devil's music. Jerry Lee Lewis, you know, played alongside people like Johnny Cash, Roy Orbison, Elvis Presley. Those guys all came out of, like, where you're based out of right now, Tennessee. And Billy Graham was calling this stuff the devil's music. And I explained that to my parents. I said, yeah, your parents didn't understand the stuff you guys grew up listening to, just like you don't understand this loud, obnoxious stuff that we love listening to. But for me personally, like, and again, another point that Steve made about electronic music is I do stuff like that in my other metal band. You know, I do industrial metal in my other band, Sonic Armada. Broken Trinity is a chance for me to get out the more black metal, thrash metal, doom and whatnot.
Forget the doom.
Yeah, the doom, exactly. Can't forget about the doom. Got to have that low end. But so it's a different side of my musical personality, but it gives me a chance to get those ideas out. Because there's a lot of stuff we do in Broken Trinity that wouldn't work in Sonic Armada, because, again, Sonic Armada is more of is an industrial metal project. Especially now, I've geared it more towards that. And
well, I'd call it more of a Blackened death industrial.
It still has black metal and death metal influences. But when I say death metal influences, more like Fear Factory type stuff. Hypocrisy, Fear Factory. Because Peter Togren from Hypocrisy also does, who, by the way, I think is a phenomenally brilliant musician.
Oh, hell yeah.
And I personally think Hypocrisy is one of the greatest death metal bands to ever walk the earth.
Hell yeah.
But he also does his project Pain, and Pain is an industrial metal project. I love Pain. I've seen both Hypocrisy and Pain in concert, and oh my God, that guy just by himself just has such a presence on stage, and he's a great dude too. Like, having gotten a chance to talk to him a few times, great guy, very talented. Not only a talented musician, a very talented engineer. I'd almost call him. He's almost like the Alan Parsons of, like, metal studio engineers. Alan Parsons being, like, you know, Alan Parsons Project, and one of the geniuses behind engineering Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon and various other Pink Floyd albums.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
So. But that's why Broken Trinity's also part of my musical personality, is I can get my more like old school classic metal influences out creatively that wouldn't work in my industrial metal project. You know, I kind of keep the two sort of compartmentalized, I guess is the word I would use. But yeah, it gives me a chance to have, you know, be able to express both sides of my musical personality. So,
dude, when you talk about parents' reactions and stuff like that, you know, it definitely makes me think. I'm very lucky, dude, because I remember when I was a kid, sitting in my room. My mom was always busting in my door because I'd be in there fucking blasting Ozzy Osbourne, "Speak of the Devil," right?
Oh yeah.
She'd come in the room. She'd be like, "Zach, I used to listen to those songs when I was a kid," because she had the black, she was into Black Sabbath, and then later I had a Wasp. I was fucking blasting Inside the Electric Search. That there's that one song in there that did a cover of fucking Uriah Heep, Easy Living. I was blasting that, and she's like, "That's Uriah Heep." She's like, "I used to have that shit." And so she was all into it, man. But like, she was telling me about like her stuff, and then I got her into the newer stuff as it was coming out, and she was into like Typo Negative, real big, man.
Oh, right on.
And,
very good.
all that kind of stuff, man. It was definitely.
Hell yeah.
I was definitely. I was very fortunate to have parents that were very open-minded, and just it wasn't a religious household at all. It was very
lucky you.
yeah, it was very.
Well, here's the thing from my end. You got to understand something. I was on the journalistic side of things for 30 years, so that's 3 generations of people. And when I started, I was very much a loner. I mean, I lived alone. I didn't really have a whole lot of friends. I was picked on and bullied a lot when I was younger, and for that reason, I suffered a lot at the hands of Christian zealots, but we'll go into that at a different time. I noticed something in my 32 years of running a music magazine, and back in 1992, I had no idea that grunge had killed metal because I was living in Savannah, driving up to Atlanta for shows.
It didn't.
It didn't. No, I agree.
It didn't. In the 90s, we were blasting fucking Obituary and fucking Deicide and Pantera and Slayer.
But what I'm saying is the official thing was, and they've been talking about this recently. MTV was moving away from the metal landscape and heavily into grunge. But yes, I mean,
MTV did. But
I went to shows in Atlanta. I saw Cannibal Corpse, Graves, Samael. But what I noticed is, every 10 years or so, like metal came back. It's come back a few times, like really big time. So, and of course, I did an interview with Abdullah, and Jeff Cirilla said, you think about this, you're a metalhead, so your kids are going to be kind of feeling cringe about listening to what you listen to. Not always, of course, and then so the kids that came in were listening to rap and hip hop, and then they had kids. So we're into the second generation. And the kids that are coming from that, and that's, probably where a lot of the new metal and metalcore started, because they didn't want to listen to what their parents listened to, which was rap, but their grandparents were listening to metal. And of course that third generation, that's when you're seeing all the classic 80s metal revival. And, to be honest with you, I'd like to think I had a hand in some of that. I still talk to Oliver Weinsheimer from Germany. He runs the Keep It True festival, and they have to do a festival twice a year. And, I would love to play that, or at the very least his Hammer of Doom festival. But I mean, I remember Bruce Corbett, may the gods rest his soul, from Rigor Mortis. I saw Rigor Mortis in Atlanta, and it was unique because he had both vocalists from both eras. But he told me, he said, Steve, when people would come to me, and this was like pre-huge internet, he said, people would ask me about Rigor Mortis and where to go to listen to stuff. He's like, I'd send them to your site, man, because, I had like 1,600 rare, out-of-print, and classic 80s metal titles on the site that you could listen to all the way through.
That's badass.
And it's like, I keep thinking, this was before Napster, and my friend pointed out to me, he's like, you had all this streaming audio because, I figured since all I'm doing is just putting print text on a page, I needed something to go with it, so I incorporated streaming real audio and band logos, and I thought, I could have been the Napster, but I wonder if I was also the catalyst that caused the music scene to go in a decline, where bands aren't really making much money. They're signing for record labels with one album. Like Steve Souza said, we're basically just traveling t-shirt salesmen.
That's fair. That's true, though.
Man,
yeah.
Billy Corgan actually recently did a podcast on his fucking YouTube channel, which is actually pretty cool. And he was talking about that whole thing about the music, the music industry taking a turn.
That's exactly what I was talking about.
He was actually saying that the CIA fucking had some had some things to do with all, like, it was like it go check it out when you get some time, man, because it'll take you down some wormholes, man, because it's pretty wild, but you never know. It's just fucking weird. But like, as far as us, like the people, the fans, the kids, man, I mean, I don't know, like, yeah, I remember in the 90s, like, it wasn't as cool to fucking blast Warrant or Poison anymore, but we were still listening to fucking death metal and stuff, like, like, I had friends that were into Nirvana and Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, and we didn't look at each other weird or anything. Like, we hung out, we'd sit there and smoke weed together, and we'd blast fucking this, and then we'd blast that, and we'd trade, like, it all sort of melded together, like, but I can see where for some of the stuff that was a little bit more theatrical and whatnot, maybe it felt a little bit too out there for the time, because at that time everything sort of wanted to be stripped back,
Yeah.
But it's all good, man. Like, nothing actually, I think the strong survived, man.
Absolutely.
Like, the strong definitely survived, and it's still here, man. Fucking, Rob Halford's still fucking out there screaming and fucking, Dio, if he was still alive, dude, he'd still be fucking doing it, and
yeah, he would.
You brought up Billy Corgan just real quick. You mentioned Billy Corgan sort of dissecting and exposing like a lot of the really shady aspects of the music business.
He's got a lot of pushback for that too, man.
I'm sure he did. Well, I'll tell you who else got a lot of pushback for it back in the day, prior to his untimely departure from this world, was Prince. Prince was very, and I'm actually a big Prince fan.
Love Prince, dude.
Yeah, Prince was very vocal about his distaste for the music industry in general. And the good thing about him, I think he was very much a he kind of did a lot of the stuff himself. I mean, he was not only a very creative force, but he was also very business minded. Yeah. He understood the business aspect, but he was totally spot on in some of the criticisms he had.
He pissed off a lot of fucking important people, man.
Yeah, the corporate, as I call it, the corporate music monopoly. He was very, very critical of it. It exists. It's a real thing. And Corgan was right about it too, I think. I know what you're referencing that Corgan talked about.
See, man, I've known this guy for 25 years, and I'm like, that explains why you're the way you are.
Yeah.
I'm learning shit about my own guitar player tonight, man. That's pretty cool.
Well, guys, we're running low on time, man. But before I let you guys go, man, is there anything else you want to let the people know? Where's the best place for them to go to support you guys and fucking buy some music merch and anything like that?
Yeah, right now we're just. I mean, I did actually press physical CDs. I just, there's a lot going on. I mean, my main songwriter and High Chief Command over here, and he's busy doing his Sonic Armada stuff, and we're doing what we can. I mean, the loss of Ray as our bass player,
but Bandcamp especially.
Yeah, Bandcamp. I mean, that was huge for us because he was good at the DIY. Like, he booked a lot of our shows. He came up with a lot of our merch, and now we're having to do it now. But we're on Bandcamp. We got 3 really kick-ass videos on YouTube.
Hell yeah.
And we're really proud of those. And we got an EP release coming out this summer.
Yes.
Hopefully by the end of the summer, called Odin Places Wall Street Bets.
Hell yeah.
It's going to be, because I like to write stories. So this is going to be the story of the warrior from Cold by Odin's Hand. And he's going to be thrust into a little bit of a different scenario here. It's going to blow some people's minds, I think. We've already had the artwork out. We're going to do 2 more songs and probably a couple of covers. Some influences of ours, and we're on the road. We're booking shows here and there. We definitely want to play a show with Burnt Witch. Those guys are awesome.
Fuck yeah, man. Hell yeah. They're in the chat room right now talking about it, man. Hell yeah.
Oh, right on. Well, hey, man, we definitely want to play a show with you guys, man. We're down. Absolutely. We'll go up there. You come down here. We don't give a fuck, dude. We'll fly to the West Coast. I don't give a shit.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Maybe we can put something together here in Tennessee, man. Who knows?
We can do that.
Hey, we are down like today.
Right on, man.
Yep.
Well, guys, before I let you go, can I get you to make us a station tag right quick?
Yeah, I'll do one for you. All right, hail, conquering warriors. This is Stephen Cannon here from Epic Blackened Doom and Broken Trinity. You are listening to Metal Devastation Radio, the heaviest megaton bomb on the planet.
All right, I'll do one too.
Hell yeah, go ahead.
All right, this is Destruction, the 7-string shredder of Broken Trinity, and you're listening to Metal Devastation Radio.
Fuck yeah. Hell yeah, guys. Hey, man, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us. I really appreciate it, man.
Oh, thank you, man. I mean, this is an honor, man. I mean, we're happy to be here. We're happy to, plant our flag on the landscape of metal. And I'll send you some individual promo spots from both Sean and I. Between the two of us, we have a bevy of different character voices like Sean Connery, Ozzy Osbourne, George Bush, Donald Trump. Man, we'll send you some really killer shit, man. I promise you.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, brothers. Well, before I let you go, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to blast some more Broken Trinity for these motherfuckers so they can go crazy, all right?
Hell yeah.
I appreciate it, man.
All right, man.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you for having us.
Thank you guys, man. We'll talk to you later, all right?
You bet.
All righty.
Take care.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.
There you have it, folks. Broken Trinity live on the motherfucking Zach Moonshine show with Metal Devastation motherfucking radio. Like I said earlier, put your speakers in your windows, put them in your front lawns, put them in your neighbor's driveway. Do whatever you gotta fucking do, man. If you don't see everybody going insane tomorrow, what the fuck are you even